you guys ever think about dying?
Hey sis, welcome to the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Wagner, and while I'm tough as a mother, sometimes I know we're all out here, tired of needing to be one. Buckle up as we land the mothership and all things motherhood in the real world. Before we move on, I'd like to thank the incredible sponsors who saw an opportunity to support women in their day-to-day journeys by joining together to make this podcast a reality. Thank you, Precision Chiropractic, Jennifer Pancyzyszyn with Edward Jones, Dutch Maids, the Avalon Foundation, and CHIKA Creative for believing in better care, better support, and better outcomes for mamas and their families in the real world. The information provided in the podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical, health, or nutritional advice. Hey friends, welcome back for another episode of the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. I'm super excited to introduce this week's guest, Dr. Andrea Mata. She is a clinical child psychologist who specializes in treating antisocial and aggressive behaviors in children and teens. And Dr. Mata had two big wins in 2023. She delivered a powerful TEDx talk titled From Murder to Mission, How I Found My Life's Calling, and you can watch that on YouTube. And her published book, the #2 parenting book, with practical tips for the pooped out parent, is available on Amazon. And so Andrea is, she's in my area and she's ridiculously amazing. And we met I was going to call it weeks. So in mom life, that really means months, right? So we met months ago, and I'm working on an initiative that I'm going to be launching here soon that we'll have our own podcasts around. But I wanted to get together with Andrea to just really glean her expertise and see how she might be able to help more families moving forward. And I just fell in love with her and all that she's doing and accomplishing out here in the world, that I wanted to have her on the podcast and talk about her new book, and more importantly, what it is that we can do as individuals out here to make our world better, make our communities better, make our homes better. And that starts with us as parents doing the right things to make us better, so that these little humans out here can go and flourish and also do ridiculously amazing things as they get older. So without further ado, Andrea Mata. We went through this at the beginning, didn't we? Welcome to the podcast, sis.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I know. I'm so excited to have you here. Andrea Mata.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I didn't even, I was like, Alicia.
I know. Well, this is the problem, right? Like, I think, everywhere I go, it's either Alicia, I got Alicia the other day. So I know you're used to this as well, but man, it's so important to me that names are right. And so we will get this. And I was super happy that, you told me at the beginning, like Dre, like Dr. Dre. And you said that's what some people call you as well, right? Dr. Dre?
Yep.
Yeah,
it's been something like ever since before I became, like when I was still in college and I was a lifeguard. Everyone's like, wait, you're going to go get your doctorate? So you're going to be Dr. Dre. Okay, Dr. Dre.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, your Rolodex here of experience and just wow, congratulations on an amazing 2023. I see all that you're doing out here. I know we're linked up on LinkedIn, no pun intended there. And, it's just so magical to see where you are, but behind every great launch is a past. And so it wasn't even until recently that I saw you do a LinkedIn post around your first book, which was your first TEDx talk, which was From Murder to Mission. So, we can't jump over that, just to take a few minutes to really understand more about it and what got you here and what is going on with your life's purpose around all that you've been up to.
Yeah. So it was interesting because for about 27 years, I held that story so tight to my chest. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, I want to do a TEDx talk. And my husband's like, hey, by the way, like Bowling Green State University is doing a TEDx event. Why don't you apply? So I was like, all right. So then I was like, more and more people were like encouraging me to share my story and not hold it so close to my chest. And so I was like, okay then. And so what the story is when I was 11 years old, my brother was murdered. So I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago in a gang-infested territory. To my dad's an immigrant from Mexico. I have 3 older brothers, very powerful, sarcastic family. And when I was 11 years old, my brother, my youngest of the 3 boys, Cisco, was murdered by someone he considered a friend. And so if you fast forward 2 years from that, when I was 13, they had asked me to read an impact statement. So how did what the murderer do, the choices he made, how did that impact my life? And so at the age of 13, I stepped into a witness stand and expressed how his choices impacted my life. And then afterwards, we recessed, and then I'm sitting between my parents, and my older brothers weren't allowed to be in the room just because, like, they didn't trust themselves to be in the room because, yeah, they're extremely protective. And then the judge he comes in, he sits down, he looks at us, and he goes, I'm not sentencing this man to death, not because of moral or professional objections against the death penalty, but because this man had a rough life. And so he had, was from an abusive family that had drugs and criminal behavior, and parents, experienced mental illness and all of those things. And so I just remember sitting there flabbergasted and being like, what? And so then that fueled me to want to become a clinical child psychologist who specializes in the treatment of antisocial and aggressive behavior, so that no 11-year-old ever has to experience what it's like to lose her best friend because someone else had a rough life. So when I'm working with clients, essentially I see those clients as the murderer as a little boy. And if I can help that client make a better choice and have a better life, or if I can give his parents better parenting practices, or I can have them to have a better high-quality romantic relationship, which then just changes the whole family as, so much, then maybe there's ripple effects. And then maybe our great-great-grandchildren can live in a society where no one loses their best friend because other people are having rough lives.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, really. I mean, if more people could just take their pain and their past, right, and turn it into something, beauty for ashes is what's coming to me. And I get that. And I want to be really careful because I think over the years too, with even things that I've been through, and we had Janelle, Massey on a while ago as well, who's a therapist, and just the miseducation of empathy and just also needing to meet people where they are. So I want to be careful. And I want to talk about this more when I'm doing podcasts, because I think we go down this lane and then it alienates, right, everybody else. And I think it's really important that people understand that, hey, maybe you're not there yet. I know I wasn't for a handful of years. I really needed time to heal. And my God, let's remind people that you even just said it took you 27 years, right, to even want to
share the story. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this does not happen overnight. It does not mean because you're amazing and that you're powerful in this moment that it didn't take some work to get there. And so, man, that feels like its own podcast, that I had all these notes that we were going to go through and talk about today. And now I'm like, woof, this is its own conversation, right? With like getting into your purpose and shedding your past and healing and walking out of that. But that is really beautiful. And I really applaud the journey that I know that likely wasn't easy to even get on the other side of this mic today, to even, want to go to school for this or really figure out how to do it. But I'm proud of you. I'm really proud of you and all that you've accomplished in 2023. So I wanted to have you on today because it's a mess out here. I'm like, I've just decided that in 2024, I've been really trying to find myself through this. Like, I knew I was supposed to do the podcast, and maybe that's why I got just passionate for a second and spouted off what I just did. But, I wanted to do this podcast, but I've been calling it with friends, like, I'm healing out loud. So I'm still finding my voice in this, but I have found my footing. And I'm finding all these things inside of me that I want to say, and they're interconnected and they're intersectional, and they're going to piss some people off, and some of it's going to be right and some of it's going to be wrong. But like, I want to get some of this out, and I'm just finding my own voice in this podcast as well. But here's what I decided in 2024. I am going to double down, because what's going on out here is not right. It's wrong. We need to come together. We need to rally. We need to start having some way more intentional conversations and some hard conversations. And so when you and I met, again, what I said was a couple of weeks ago, but likely months now, as a clinical psychologist, I would love your perspective as to what you envision is really going on at large out here. And I know there's a couple of things underneath of that, but knowing your past, knowing your training, and now being in practice for a plethora of years, like, what do you think, Doc?
Oh, that is a loaded question. I'm with you, Alicia. Alicia, I got it right?
You did. You did.
So I'm with you. So like, I'm in that where like, I want people to like me, but like, I'm done with people liking me in 2024 because I can't take it anymore. I've actually drafted like Bright Spot Family's like manifesto. And the first line is like, I can't do it anymore. I cannot. And I will not sit back and allow people to continue to share information that's not research supported when it's hurting our youth. And the biggest thing that I think is hurting our youth is this movement towards like gentle parenting. And like gentle parenting can, and I did like a whole virtual workshop on it, and there's actually going to be another one coming up in a few weeks, where it's this focus on feelings. Don't get me wrong. Feelings are important. Emotions are important, but that can't be the end all be all that like schools are doing and parents are doing. Because when we're only focusing in on the emotions and we do not hold our children accountable and our youth accountable, the future is disastrous. Like absolutely disastrous. Like my sister-in-law sent me this hilarious tweet the other day. I'm going to read it. So it said, kid having a complete meltdown at the grocery store. The mom goes, sweetheart, please use your words and tell me what's wrong. Kid sniffles, wipes his nose on his shirt. Deep, steadily breathing, screams, when you tell me no, it sounds bad in my ears and feels bad in my heart. And like, then there's like, and I get like validating emotions and validating feelings, but like that can't be the only thing that we're doing as parents and teachers, because then you're just raising kids who don't want to do things when they don't feel like doing things. And how far are we going to come and how successful are we going to be if that's what we're doing?
So am I hearing the large overarching issue is kids feeling like they're being held accountable or having boundaries, right? Like, what are the boundaries parents are putting in place, and when they're not happening, right, how are they coming to or away from them? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think a lot of people are focusing in on emotions, but they're not setting expectations. They're not setting goals for their kids. There's not like clear boundaries of what is going on. And we're focusing in on just how kids are feeling and not like, hey, there needs to be these expectations for children. So like in my book, the whole premise of the book is like, let's set high expectations for our kids, but within the context of the warm and fuzzies, because that's what's going to lead children to the best developmental outcomes. And that's what is going to lead them to be a successful adult. But if we're only focusing in on feelings, which is right now being like very much encouraged by lots of people who call themselves parenting experts, I don't think it's going to do very well for our society at all. Because our schools are a mess. Yeah, our families are a mess.
So what are some things contributing to that, right? I have my own beliefs. I think as a 40-something woman out here that has 2 small-aged children, right, 8 and 10 years old, I see a disconnect in our modern world and our world having, right, risen up to this occasion. And I think we're starting to feel it more than ever, right? This is not working. What are the policies? What are the expectations at work that need to change, right? And parents have sacrificed their children on the backs of jobs and success. And I see how that happens. People have bills to pay, mouths to feed, like all the above. So I see an unaligned culture I see this one track that we have put all human beings on as it relates to healthcare, as it relates to education, right? As it relates to how we parent our kids. And so what I also see is parents are just lost because, I mean, my God, the way most of us were parented was wrong. So if that was wrong, what I'm seeing a lot of parents struggle to understand is what's right. Yeah, like the pendulum, right? So those are a few things I see. So tell me what's right or wrong in there and then add to it.
So I think what you're saying, Alicia, is correct. Like how a lot of us were parented was kind of like this more militant parenting, right? Like it's our way or the highway. And it's like, we didn't like that. That was not all that great. And so now we're going to swing the complete opposite way where we're getting into more like fluffy parenting, where it's like, we're going to give them lots of warm and fuzzies, but we're not going to expect things from them because that's just, so we swung too far this way. And what I want us to do is swing kind of back towards the middle, which leads to the best developmental outcomes, where we're setting these expectations for our children and we're kind of giving them loving relationships at the same time. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that when you set these expectations and then when you give them the warm and the fuzzies and the fun, it makes life just so much easier because you don't have to get into these power struggles with your kids because it's like, did they hit the expectations? Yes, no. Okay, they didn't hit the expectation. Give them a logical consequence. Give them a natural consequence. Shape their behavior in a way that's actually going to work.
You know,
and I think parents don't know what to do.
Yeah, they don't. And I'm guilty. I mean, we've all been there, right? Like, I'm sure even on the front end, as you know, even some of the experts I've had on, it's like, look, this is a challenge for everybody. But I also see, because parents are so tired or they're so burnt out, right, that there's the camp that are just lost. And I can fully appreciate on this podcast today with all of you why that is, right? So no shame, blame, and guilt. Like, we just have to realize, like, we're burnt out, we're overextended, and like that's also not serving our children. So how do we clean that up? And then I think there's the camp too that, like, okay, then you've got people that they know some of the expectations, they know the goals, but then these kids, right? Like, they're also, I think, a lot smarter than we were growing up, and they are like more strong-willed, and they are like, you know, digging their heels in more. And so I think some parents, again, whether it's their burnout, they're tired, or it's just like, it's hitting their own trauma and their own triggers, right, from growing up. Right. So it's like, hands up, like, fine, you win. And so I'll never forget, you know, we were working with a therapist years ago when we were starting to run into some issues with Liv, and I'm going to get into that in a second because I think health is something that before we move on into your book, we need to address that for a second. But I'll never forget this therapist being like, listen, you've got to, if you really love your child, and I know you do, you have to do this every single time, even if it means you're trying it 30 times this month, right? And I'm so glad that he said that. It's kind of like I used to work in pharmaceuticals, and you know, there was statistics out there and I can't remember it, but if you were to give a patient just the knowledge that they were going to experience a symptom, that they would be more compliant, right, along the way. They just needed to know what to expect. And it makes me think of like parenting. Like, if someone would have just told me when I left the hospital that my daughter could have colic, like, I can think of months worth of trauma that would have prevented. Or like hearing you even just say what you said right now, right? Or like this therapist telling me that it's like, hey, you might have to do this 30 times. Oh, okay, cool. I might have to try it 30 times. I'm not doing it wrong. This is to be expected. Quite frankly, it's the same thing that you just said. We have to set expectations and goals for kids and boundaries. But because so many of us weren't taught them, it's why therapists, I think at times, and why I even met with you, was we need a solution for like family plans and family therapy. Because the whole family unit, the whole system is dysfunctional, and parents are needing way more help out here than anybody's willing to admit.
Right. And I think that's the thing, because there's so much pressure going on, and for, like you said, adults, and like people are tired and we're working more hours than we need to be. And we're like all of the expectations for extracurricular activities and youth sports and the perfect Pinterest style birthday parties and all of the things. And it's just absolutely exhausting. But yeah, like it takes time. And I have a chapter in the book called Consistency, Consistency, Consistency. It's going to take you doing it over and over and over again before you're going to see the results. But I think one of the things that was funny, I had a new client come in yesterday, a new family come in yesterday, and there's another chapter in the book called Your Child, the Escape Artist. And the number of times this child used escape artist behaviors on his parents, I was like, oh my goodness. I just wanted to look at them and give them a copy of the book and be like, turn to page whatever it is and read this chapter on your way home and start counting, because my goodness, like everything they were trying to do, they were just trying to get themselves out of that uncomfortable feelings and being held accountable.
Yeah. Something that you and I have talked a lot about, and what I have been working to do, I would say over the past year, specifically over the past couple of months, is working with healthcare providers in not just the medical, but on the behavioral health side as well, who understand a lot of these childhood epidemics. And so, I think I would love your advice on this, and we've talked a little bit about it, but if you really are starting to run into a lot of issues where something doesn't feel right, that there could potentially be a health, rationale that is contributing to these issues with your children. And so it's why I'm so excited to work with a network of professionals that get this, because if I'm working with people and we're able to, help get their health conditions under wraps, we can now get them off and they can actually, their brain inflammation is down. They can actually pay attention. They can work with providers. They can take these coping strategies or these cognitive behavioral therapies and actually do something with them. So I bring that up because I think for a lot of parents too, and where I was at the beginning, like there were some things going on that it's like, it seemed behavioral. It seemed like I needed a therapist, and we did, but we had some health things that were actually contributing to this. So I also want to give parents just the consideration today that this might not be your kid exactly having a mental health crisis. It might be a health crisis causing mental health symptoms. And so, I think that if you're on the fence with that as a parent, like reach out or make sure that you're asking the right questions. And unfortunately, too many providers out here aren't up to date on a lot of the physiological issues or reasons that are contributing to this. But I would love your feedback, because I think if parents are really finding that something feels off, oftentimes there is.
Right. And so one of the big things that I do with my practice is like if someone's coming to me and they're like, okay, here's like these are the behavioral problems that we're struggling with, those kind of things. Like I always have conversations about them like, okay, we can go the medication route. Like this might not, and like if we might do the behavioral thing, like we might try, behavioral therapy, those kind of things. But if it's not working, usually I sit back and I'm like, okay, why is this not working? Like, could it be one of these health things that we need to tackle? And then I will totally recommend like, hey, go to the Josh District. Are we allowed to say it yet?
Yep, we're allowed to say it. Yep.
There we go. Josh District. And like work through all of the health stuff to figure out, okay, are we fighting a losing battle? Because like, I know my strategies work as long as parents are putting them into practice, how I'm telling them to put them into practice. But then I also know like I can't fight against some of this other stuff that's going on that I can't actually see it going on.
Yeah. I remember we went to a therapist and there was so much trauma associated with, again, our daughters dealing with PANS, pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome. And, we were getting caught in a lot of this where it was like, you're not like me, the mom. You must not be doing this right. You need to be doing this better. And I mean, I'm doing everything right. And it was so traumatic that, as therapists, you have to consider abuse. You have to consider what are the other trauma considerations that are going on. And I think I've heard so many cases lately. And again, I swim in circles that a lot of people aren't in as it relates to autism, PANS, sensory processing. And it's so heartbreaking, the amount of parents that are currently getting calls for like children's services and, you know, a lot of these different things that are going on. And it's their kid that is having a neuropsychiatric event related to toxins in their body, or, you know, they have some underlying infection, they have mold in the house, and like their immune systems are just breaking. But it's why I'm trying so hard to work with different providers like yourself who get these childhood epidemics, because there are kids who are having major health issues, and it also can contribute to behaviors. And so I haven't done a very good job, I think, in some of my past podcast episodes, like really tweezing this out. But as we consider, like, okay, are you burned out as a parent? Like, let's figure this out, right? Do you need therapy? Yeah. Do you need a coach? Do you need somebody that can help you really just take your day and help you rework it? Do you have some trauma that you need to process so that you can stand there and better regulate yourself while your child is dysregulated, so you can help them get there too, right? Or does your child really need someone like yourself, Dr. Dre, which I will now forever call you? Like, do they really need somebody to help with their oppositional defiance disorder? Do they need some cognitive behavioral therapy? And I just think it's the beauty of like you picking up the phone that day and being willing to have a conversation, because in the past 10 years, between social media, smartphones, these health issues, parents being busier than ever, like it's the perfect storm, right? And so if you're dealing with a storm the way we currently have healthcare siloed, like this isn't going to work.
No, because like, here's the thing. So like last week it was super interesting. So I've been working with the program here in Toledo. So it's a not-for-profit organization dealing with fatherlessness. And so for the last 3 months, and last week was our third one, like the group of moms come together and they each got a copy of the book. And then they get an hour and a half with me to ask me questions about what's going on. And so one of the moms, it was her first time there, and she was talking about how her daughter doesn't, like, you know, has all of this stuff and like oppositional defiant disorder and this and that and all this stuff. And I'm like listening to her and I'm like, okay. I'm like, what's the one behavior you want to change? Give me the one behavior, because I'm not going to change multiple behaviors all at the same time. It doesn't work. We're going to change.
I'm sorry. Would you say that again?
You're only going to focus in on one behavior at a time. I did a parenting coaching call the other day with this woman that I absolutely love in one of the Carolinas. And she's like, okay, I want to like change this. And so we went through the whole process and I told her like how to change it. She's like, okay, well, what about lying? And I'm like, hold up. We are only changing one behavior at a time, because or else it's exhausting and you can't do it and it's not going to work. So I looked at the mom. I'm like, okay, tell me one behavior. And she's like, I just want her to flush the toilet. And I was like, huh. I'm like, okay, tell me, like, how often does she flush the toilet? She's like, rarely ever. And I'm like, does she wash her hands? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, have you ever looked into whether or not she does it? Like, have you ever asked her, like, what is it about, like, the process of flushing the toilet that she doesn't like? And she's like, no. I'm like, I bet you it's probably the sound of the toilet. And she goes, what? And I was like, she may not flush the toilet because it might just feel like an airplane is on either side of her head and it's just, and that's why she might not flush the toilet. I'm like, and then she's like, well, she does have this and she does have this and she does have this. I'm like, you probably want to go have her checked out for a sensory processing issue. Yeah. And she's like, what? And I'm like, yeah. Like, I'm like, you might not be able to change that because it might just be like, we might not be able to change that behavior right now because it might be an issue that we don't know about.
Hey friends, not feeling like the best version of yourself lately? I get it. That's why my family and I go see Dr. Taylor at Precision Spinal Care. Whether it's you or one of your kiddos, Precision Spinal Care in Perrysburg, Ohio can help you crack the code to better health. Call 419-873-7223 or visit chiropractorperrysburg.com to learn more. Yeah. I think a lot of that is happening, right? Like with sensory or just some of these health issues, and parents want it to stop. And for good reason. Trust me. I've been in this game, right? For 6 years. I get it, people, but right. And some things you're really going to improve, and some things with kids who have ADHD, autism, right? Or some of these sensory processing issues, like certain things you're not going to change, and it's part of who they are. And it's right. Learning to build your life and your home and your expectations around all of these things. Now, I will say, I do believe there are, unfortunately, for too many families, they're handed a diagnosis and they think that's also it. And we know over here on the functional integrative side, which is why I'm opening the Joss District and launching a pediatric wellness center for families, as these are not just diagnoses. Like there are so many ways to help families improve the health of their children and these symptoms. So I think like a lot of people listen, they can't see what you and I have been doing. Like you had that pendulum swing a little bit ago when we talked about, parenting. But what we also have seen is, right, there's a pendulum on the health side where it's like, families feel like they get handed a diagnosis and some of these providers are like doom and gloom. And it's like, no, don't buy that either, because that's not the only outcome for you and your family. There are so many things that can be done out here, and there's people like myself and people like you who are digging into this deeper and, quite frankly, collaborating. Like I think that's really going to be important moving forward, because again, like I said, this brain and body, they are not two different systems. They are intertwined, and we need more individuals and providers out here willing to work together and want to tweeze through what has been unfolding here the past 10 years.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's talk about your book. So it's, I love the name. So the number 2 parenting book, Practical Tips for the Pooped Out Parent. And so you have to explain this more, because I know, because I see all of your marketing, but like talk about the name of this book and why you went with it.
Okay. So the whole premise of the book, like when I was trying to come up with like, okay, how do I write a parenting book? I'm like, what don't I like about parenting books that are currently out there? They're boring. They're too long-winded. They have too many like theories behind stuff. People are too busy parenting to learn how to be better parents.
I know.
So I'm like,
wild.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, so what can I do? I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm going to write a book that parents can read that's enjoyable or funny or levity, in the time that it takes them to poop. A mom poop, not a dad poop, because those are significantly different times.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
So the book is all about, it has 29 practical tips. How each one is set up is that the first one is a real life story, usually like a parenting fail, either from my own life, my client's life, my friend's life, something along those lines, that talks about a variety of issues. And then the second part is a practical way to address that. And then the third part is like, where is that? Are the people, the characters, where are they now? Or like, what happened to them? Because I realized like lots of people want to know like what happened to Cody.
I love it. And then what are some of the chapters? Like you brought up like the consistency one earlier. Like, can you just kind of walk us through like what are some of the practical applications that are in your book that can give, people an idea of why they definitely should be reading this?
So it's broken up into 3 sections. So the first section is what I call the fundamentals. So like, what are the basic things that parents should be doing if they do nothing else? So the first one, I start off the book, it's called All Is Not Lost, because lots of people think that like, I don't know who started this, but it's like the first 7 years are super critical, or the first 10 years. And like, then people are like, I haven't been doing well as a parent for the first 7 years. Now, like my kid's messed up. And I'm like, no, like you can always change. You can always recover. So that's how the book starts, other than the intro. And then it goes into consistency. And that like, not all kids can be parented the same way. That's another big like, for parents, is that like, you can't, like, the parenting principles are the same, but the execution is going to be different. So that's kind of like the first section. Then the second section is how to establish high expectations. So this is all about behavioral modification. So how do you get your kids to do what you want them to do? So we talk about positive reinforcement. We talk about logical consequences and natural consequences. And we talk about escape artist behavior and why kids do what they do, because that's huge for parents, and why kids throw temper tantrums. That's all in there in that section. Then the last section is the warm and the fuzzies. So how do you build that loving, high quality relationship with your child so that they want to be around you when you're like 80 years old and like, you need that, like you need them to take care of you then. And so, and that like in there, like it starts off with like your ratios off. So it really talks about the 5-to-1 ratio of we should be having 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative interaction with our child. And if we can maintain that positive to negative ratio, well, then our relationships are going to be better. And then it goes into like how to hear your kid and how to be there for your child. And then the very last chapter is all about parental burnout.
Yeah. Well,
because
like,
you can't be a good parent if you're burned out.
Yeah. I'm glad that you bring this up. I mean, it's so funny when I talk to people. Like, I don't know what the perception is. Like, I've just been out here ever since I started my first business, and I've started two. But it's so funny. I'll come out to like networking events and people are like, you're so busy. And I'm like, I mean, yes and no, but I don't like wear it as a badge. But what I do is I have dinner almost every single night with my family. I have breakfast every single morning almost with my family. Like John and I have made really intentional decisions in our family to build what it is that we're trying to build. And with that has come so many sacrifices, right? And so it's interesting as we sit here, what I don't think I've heard a lot in some of the podcasts I've listened to, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I listen to some, but I'm a busy mom, right? So I fit them in. But I think what we have not said out loud is you just said, right? Okay, burnout parents, they want to make changes. They can start over whenever they want. Like, that is a beautiful, right, point of entry and permission for people. However, what I don't think we do a very good job of saying is that whatever it is that you're looking for to change in your family, you're likely going to have to realign what it is that you're doing, and you're likely going to have to sacrifice something, right? So I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. We have to eat organic food. Our kids can't have chemicals. They react to them. We spend an ungodly amount of money. I don't spend money on clothes like I used to. I don't get my nails done anymore. I used to like getting a massage every other week. Now I'm like every other month. I mean, just like things like that I think just people assume, right? That it's like these changes just happen, and they don't. They come with really sitting down, taking inventory of what in the actual is going on in your life, and then having to stare at a few of them and like put them on the raft, man, and like let them drift. Because I think I heard you, it was actually a post I saw you do the other day, like this lie about we're able to have it all. Yeah, no, that's going to have to go on the raft too and go off, because like it isn't true, and it's been fed to us. And if we say yes to something, we're really saying no to something else. And like, what are we really saying no to? And that was for me over the past 10 years, for sure the past 5, that like I had to make some major changes in order to keep the rails, for us moving along here in the Wagner house.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing. It's like, we're with you. Like, I have breakfast with my kids majority of the time. And sometimes, like this morning, like when everything was busy yesterday and we weren't able to, and like I was sick on Sunday and I was in bed for 9 hours. And so like we didn't get to the grocery store, and we don't have milk. Well, guess what? We had donuts for breakfast this morning, and it is okay. But like most times we are having dinner together. Like I work late Monday and Tuesdays, but the other 5 nights we're having dinner together. And like people say the same thing about me. They're like, we're just impressed by like your bandwidth. And I'm like, yeah, but like you don't like I'm doing stuff, but like I'm also prioritizing my family. Like that's number one priority. And if at any point like my kids are like, this isn't working for us, or my husband's like, this is not working for us, guess what's the first thing to go? Anything that's getting in the way of my family.
Yeah. I feel by default that in order for women to have gotten where we are, that we have for sure sacrificed ourselves, right? Like first and foremost, 1000% have. And nobody has really said that out loud. But what no one is really saying out loud is we have sacrificed our kids to get here. And I don't think it was by choice, but I think we're at a point based on where we are with numbers, right? That we can sit here and out loud together say that this is okay anymore. And I think that's the point of entry, that it's like, I'll just put like I've had this raft, right? Like with us during this conversation, like I'm putting all the crap on it, right? Like our kids are being poisoned and like, we're allowing this, and like we're allowing this ridiculous educational model to continue that isn't working for all kids, or like the way we're doing healthcare, like, even therapy. Like what a lot of parents are really saying by sending their kids to therapy is I need help. And that is okay. And it's okay that you need to go to a therapist and maybe sit down and process some of this trauma, but it's also okay to get with a therapist and learn regulation tactics and techniques in order to better learn how to parent your kid. Now, I also think what I don't think therapists understand at times is that's what parents are doing. And so like if you're also not getting what you need from therapists, what I love about you is you have bridged that gap. Like that's what you've done as a clinical psychologist, right? Is you have really picked up that like, wait, what parents are really saying and waving the flag out here is I need help. And you are doing a phenomenal job of that. And that's why I think it's got to be this happy medium between us putting stuff on the raft and sending it off. But, where are the people out here that can really help families get back on track? And you, my friend, are doing just that.
I'm trying. Trying to focus in and do those things. And that's something that someone like posted recently about like the difference between therapy and coaching. And I was like, that makes so much sense, because there are some families that need like 1 to 2 like parenting coaching sessions and then they're done. But like they don't need to wait on my like 3-month wait list to get into therapy for like essentially 2 hours of my time, where like now like because I'm offering more like just one-off parenting coaching calls, it's like, just let's meet for, we could, if you're in California, let's meet on Zoom. You tell me what's going on. I will tell you, like, give you some education, help you figure it out, and then go. Like I said, like 2 weeks ago, I did one with a woman in the Carolinas, and we, figured it out. And then she like messaged me like not even a week later. She's like, that worked wonders. And I was like, yep. Like, okay, congratulations. Yay, woohoo.
I love that you bring up coaching versus therapy and counseling. And so, it's one of the reasons I reached out to you. Like, I know where my line is as a health coach and as a life coach. And what I have noticed out here over the years is that people just get stuck in the plan. And like, that's what I love, right? Like I love it's why I love consulting. What strategy is one of my strong points is I love helping families, like the things that you might not have time to do, right? Like you're going to help them process their trauma. You're going to help them come up with techniques, but where a coach can really come in and where you might need someone separate if you're not getting what you need from a therapist is the plan, like coming up with the plan and then coming up with the execution. Like, how are you starting your day? What are the 800 things? What are the 600 that you need to let go? Like, what do you want to concentrate on? How are you dropping your kid off? How are you picking your kid up? Like, is their blood sugar dropping? Is that why they're being assholes when you pick them up from school?
You need to give them food?
Yeah. Like there's all these different things, like again, for your sensory kids. And I mean, but people don't think about that. It's like, we just run autopilot with how we're doing things. And it's like, you really may need to get a different plan put together. Right. And then some of the stuff that you currently have going on autopilot, it ain't coming into your new plan. Like you gotta put it on the raft. You got to push it off, and you got to realize that you're in a new, right? You're in a new zone, and you got to go from there. But I think, what I've heard over the years, sis, like, it's gotten so territorial. I mean, as someone that's been out here coaching, and don't get me wrong, I get why you got to be really careful. You're dealing in a slippery slope out here with trauma, right? And, past patterns and all of these different areas. But I think, again, everything's been so territorial. Instead of being like, well, they shouldn't be out here coaching and they're in our space. It's like, where does coaching fit? And I think that's what's been so unique. Like, even working with some of these health providers and functional medicine doctors, after working with them for 6 months and getting them comfortable with what we're doing, of course I needed them. But what's been really powerful is they're now coming back and being like, we don't have time to do this stuff. We don't have time to sit down and go through to tell them how to eat and what to do and how to shop and put these plans together. And they're like, we need you. And so I think more of that is needing and wanting to happen organically with health and wellness. It's just everything has gotten so territorial. But I don't know. I mean, I see more women out here, at least, who are picking up the phone and making these connections and wanting to see things change. And so, again, I know that's how we got connected, but I'm seeing a big need, right, for families to better understand how to parent. They want help, and the flags are up, but I haven't seen a good correlation between therapists who just really say, well, what they're asking for here is help. And so that's why I love your book, The Pooped Out Parent, and these applications. What are the fundamentals? Like, are you, without giving the book away, like what, like, if let's just say somebody's on this pod with us, they can't afford the book. They will never get the book. Like, what are you leaving parents with through these applications that, like, this is it, guys? Like, these are the things that need to happen.
Well, first of all, if someone can't afford the book, they just need to email me and say, like, hey, heard you on the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. Would love a copy of your book, but it's not in the budget right now.
I love that.
Guess what? I'm going to email them. I'm going to tell them, like, give me your address. And guess what? I have a whole stack of sponsored books that people have already bought for this very reason. So you just email me, you tell me your address, and I will mail you a copy of the book and a super cute Coop the Poop bookmark. I don't know if they can see.
My gosh, she's holding it up. For those of you that can't see, it is literally a roll of toilet paper bookmark. Stop it. It's so fun.
Yeah.
With the poop on top.
Yes.
The little poop emoji.
So let's just start there. So, like, if the only reason why you are not reading this book is because it's not in the budget right now, believe me, I get it. Email me, tell me your address, tell me you're from the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast, and it will be in your mailbox within, let's be honest, 2 weeks.
Not 24 hours, 2 weeks. And we'll put your email in the show notes. Yes. That way, if anybody, your website will be in the show notes, but we'll make sure to get your email. Okay, so that's number one. So if they need a book and can't afford it, but if, let's say it's going to take them a minute, like, what are just the things that you would take this book, boil it down, and really leave parents with?
Okay, so the fundamentals. We already talked about the first chapter. The second chapter, and I love this title so much. It's You Can't Parent from the Couch. Meaning, parenting is a front-loaded activity. It is an active activity. It is not a passive activity. You cannot sit on your couch and parent your children well. You can try, but it's not going to happen. And so, like, really getting in and, like, putting in the work early on to reap the benefits later on, I think will be huge for parents. Because I see too many parents just handing their kids their phone or their screen and being like, here you go. And I'm like, that's not, like, no, don't no, that doesn't necessarily work. We're talking about consistency. I think the other big thing is, like, problem solving and, like, being able to adapt as a parent. Like, okay, what situation am I currently in and how can I make that better? So I walk through, like, realistic problem solving skills, and I, go through what the problem solving techniques I teach, like, all of my clients. Scaffolding is huge. So only giving them, like, enough of what they actually need And then we talk about not over-parenting your kids and not over-scheduling your kids.
Mm-hmm. So what's over-parenting? What does that mean?
Over-parenting is when you are doing things for your children that they can do themselves.
Yeah.
Like getting them dressed in the morning. Do I really care what my 5-year-old wears to preschool? No. Do I care that she's able to dress herself and she's been able to dress herself since she was 3 years old? Yes. And now I don't have to worry about that. And so like, and I have like a whole list. It was funny, like that mom group again for the program. There's this mom going through like the list of like because I have a checklist of like, here, do you do any of these things? And she's like sitting there. She's like, yeah. And then the next statement is, if you marked off numerous of these, you may be a helicopter mom, a snowplow parent, or a bulldozer parent. And she's like, oh. I'm like, yeah, don't do those things for your kids. Like, stop it.
But like you said, never too late to start over, right?
Correct. And like learning those things and being aware of those things is half the battle.
Yeah. I was so encouraged. I had a dad, actually. It's so funny, like these guys that listen to the podcast and reach out to me. And it's like, because the title of the podcast is Mama Trauma Barbie, that, you know, like, I mean, I appreciate that they're even reaching out, but it's so funny, like this perception that they can't publicly post on anything that they see. But this dad reaches out and he's letting me know about this situation that happened with his daughter. And so he shared that he's grateful for the podcast because it's helped him connect with his older daughter. And I think she's in her 20s from just some bantering back and forth and what I got out of the conversation. But what really encouraged me about his conversation was some things that he has taken through his journey and started to meet his daughter where she was at. She's in her 20s. And right, he's like, I feel like I have such healing with my daughter. And like, it just made me smile because it goes to what I hope parents keep in mind, that parenting is hard and this is hard. Like, let's just say that out loud, right? This is hard. And like, it doesn't feel at times like the benefit is there when they're little, and then they turn into teenagers. And we're going to talk about more on that in a minute. But it's like, there's never a missed opportunity to circle back around and improve this. And like, here's this dad and here's this daughter, and she's in her 20s, and he feels like they finally have bonded around some of these things that maybe he felt he's done wrong. And all he did was meet her where she was at, you know, acknowledge that he didn't do it right, wanted to hear her and what she needed, and he made the changes. And I just thought that was really beautiful, that as we sit here at times, like, I've screwed it up. I mean, you know, you talked about even overparenting, like with a child with health issues. I caught myself about halfway through, and I think I probably caught myself around when she was 8 and now my daughter's 10, that I found myself sitting there one day being like, and I didn't say overparenting at the time, but I knew that like, I'm like, she has now leveled up in an area where she has grown, and I am overcompensating, and I now need to back it up. Right. And I think, again, one of my favorite quotes, and I say it on a lot of these podcasts, is, if it feels hard, it is. So like, if something like you're just beating your head up against the wall and just slowing down long enough to be like, what's going on here? And like, that's where I found myself a few years ago with her, that it's like, dude, you're over parenting. Like, she healed in a few areas, and she doesn't need you breathing down her neck all the time anymore.
Right. And so like, this was the February meeting that we met, and like the mom made the mistake. She like sat next to me and she like brought this up, and I'm like, you ready for me to push? And she's like, and I'm like, what are you getting? Because she was talking about how her 10-year-old son sleeps in her bed with her. And I was like, what? And she's like, I don't want him. Like, I'm like, but what are you getting out of it? And she's like, what? And I'm like, you're getting something out of him sleeping with you. Well, what are you getting out of it? And I'm like, it's not a creepy kind of thing. I'm like, but what are you getting out of it? And all of a sudden she like put her head down and she like sat back, and she was like, guilt. And I'm like, what guilt? She's like, it reduces the guilt. And she's like, he's adopted, his dad left us, this. She's like, by me letting him sleep in the bed with me, like, it reduces my guilt.
Okay, we got to talk about this one because I think this is what you're referencing when you're saying that gentle parenting is not working and it's not helping children, right? Like find their place. And so this is a big one. I see it on social media all the time. I see parents going back and forth about it, right? There's the camp that this is what they need. No kid is still sleeping with their parents when they're a teen. And while that might be true, what is it doing? Like what is that cutoff and that line? And like when we hear that you can and could and should be doing it versus why at 10 years old you should be sleeping in your own bed. Because I don't want it to be shame, blame, and guilt for people listening, but you are the expert in the room, right? There is data and research and reasoning for this. So like, what is it?
Right. Like, so specifically for why kids should be sleeping in their own bed at 10?
Yeah.
Because like, so like I even encourage like sleep training, and that like sleep training and that whole thing like can cause lots of opinions because people are like, well, you're traumatizing your child. And I'm like, you're not traumatizing your child. You're just allowing them to sleep. When you sleep train them as early as 4 months, you're teaching your child, your infant, that they can fall asleep on their own without all of the things like white noise machines and, this and that and this, all the stuff, right? Sleeping crutches. By teaching them to sleep alone, like we all tend to sleep better when we're by ourselves. And then like wherever you can, like you should be able to fall asleep by yourself with all of these different, sleep crutches. And so like by the age of 10, you should be sleeping. That's way past the point of like you should be, sleeping by yourself. Because the other thing is if you're sleeping with your mom, he might not be getting the best sleep because he might be disrupted when you come in, because I would hope that like a 10-year-old and a mom aren't going to bed at the same time. And so like he needs more sleep than you do as the adult. And so like then you're disturbing him. Well, is he getting the best sleep that he could? And if he's not getting enough sleep or the good sleep quality, well, then what all is that impacting? It's impacting his focus. It's impacting his mood. It's impacting his behavior. It's impacting his ability to learn and all of the things. And so it's like, ideally, kids are sleeping in their own beds as early as 4 months.
Like I noticed for us, it became very difficult that for a while, one of our, it was like, okay, we would lay with you on like Tuesdays and Thursdays. And it's kind of the same thing with electronics, right? Like we put these boundaries on it with their little kids. And so like, even though you're trying to, as the parent, give special privilege or you're trying to meet them where they are, I've also noticed like that can be detrimental because like they can't, now this isn't all of them. It's like you said earlier, they can be very different in what their needs are, but Liv could maneuver it, but like my son, like, I mean, he just is a consistency kid. And if you deviate from the structure, like he really struggles, and it made it more of an issue versus a positive. So we kind of had to like go back on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, like exactly. Like some kids you can do like with like our rule in our house is that like you like if we let them, like our kids would sleep in our bed with me every single night. Yeah. They just love it. Especially our oldest, our twin girl. But like we've put the boundary on, if you are sick, then you get to sleep. Like if you have a cold or the flu or like you're going to puke, then you get the opportunity. Other than that, like you are sleeping in your own bed.
Mm-hmm. What's though, like, the data that's out there that back in the day, right? Or you see a lot of these kids like, strapped to their mom, they're in these slings. I mean, they're still not 10, right? Like at what point, what does the data and the research say about needing to start, letting your kids go a bit in order to build that independence?
So like for the most part, like the philosophy that I follow is more like the Ferber method, where he like even says like as early as 3 months, they can be sleeping in their own by themselves. They can be putting them like not putting themselves to bed, but they can fall asleep on their own at 3 months. And so then it's like by carrying them around, like I remember I had a student and I think she was like 15 months old. Her 15-month-old wasn't walking yet. And most kids walk around 12 months old, and her 15-month-old wasn't walking yet. And she was like talking to me about it. And I was like, well, how often do you carry her?
Yeah.
And she was like, all the time. And I'm like, well, if you're carrying her all the time, well, then her leg muscles aren't being built up. And so she's not able to walk. Like she hasn't developed those muscles yet. And so I try to get parents. I have a friend right now. She has, how old is he? 2. He's 2 years old, and they have to lay with him for an hour every night. And it's exhausting for them.
Yeah.
I'm like, can I just sleep train him, please?
Yeah.
Like, just let me sleep train him.
So parents can reach out to you, it sounds like, for sleep training. So you do parent training, you do kind of family systems, right? Health and
huge.
training, family plans. And then it sounds like you're also, offering these workshops that are out there. So how can families get a hold of you, or what are the different things that you're offering?
Yes. So one thing that I'm super excited about, other than the book, is that probably starting, I would say probably like mid-April, beginning of May, I'm going to start doing a group parenting group, coaching group. And so what that's going to look like is once a month, I'm going to do a webinar on something that I see like a lot of families struggling with. So, social media, attachment styles, busyness, summer, like how to not go crazy during the summer, those kind of things. So you're going to get like one workshop per month. Then you're going to get weekly group coaching calls. So like we'll all be together and there'll be a topic for each week. And then I'll teach on it and give practical strategies. And then people can kind of ask questions for their own situations. So that'll be every week. And then once a month, people will get like an individual 60-minute session with me. And it'll be for 3 months. And it's really geared towards parents that have kids with oppositional and defiant behavior. So those little kids that just tell you no just for the sake of telling you no, those are the kids that I love. But lots of parents are like, stop it.
Yeah. No, it can be extremely maddening. And again, like the line between what is learned behavior versus what is health, and what's both, right? And so I love that so many people listening have somebody who is knowledgeable on these techniques and how you can help their family. It's interesting. Another guest I'm hoping to have in season 2 is Danielle Nelson with Brain Bright. And it's so interesting hearing you talk about parents who are either carrying their kids too long, putting them in the pack and plays. They're just not getting as much movement. And so it's impacting their primitive reflexes. And you need these primitive reflexes to integrate so that your brain, it's almost like moving the lever right inside your body to move along in development.
Right.
And so because so many of these kids aren't getting the movement, they aren't moving these primitive reflexes along. And it's also causing regression in development for kids, which can cause behaviors. And so that's really interesting too. So to hear you talk about, right, like it's yes, we're your baby, but like, again, we have to realize that by being burnout or by just trying to do it all, or, like you said, the pendulum, it just goes both ways, that we have really overextended in so many different areas that it's not only impacting parenting, but it's impacting development of our children. And so all of us just being like, okay, right, like here are some areas where I need to improve, or here's potentially where I got it wrong, or just saying out loud, right? Like having these podcasts to have these conversations. And again, I just want to be so careful. Like we're not trying to shame, blame, and guilt. Again, I've said it on multiple podcasts. I am guilty of so much of this myself. And it's one of the reasons for wanting to do the podcast. But my God, like things are progressing at such a speed that I just don't think any other generation has had to deal with before. And so these conversations are so incredibly important. So I know we only have a few minutes left, but I want to dive in. We've talked what feels like a little bit about our little kids, right? But like talk to us about maybe a few things from your perspective that you think would be important for tweens, and then as our teens from a parenting perspective to just help us, right, bring this in a little tighter so that we can be more available for those older kids?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing facing tweens and teens right now is social media. All the kids want to be on all the social media, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I guess Facebook probably less so. Instagram.
Yeah, because we're on it. Yeah.
Snapchat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Snapchat and TikTok are like the two big ones. And so I think what the research is actually suggesting is holding off on social media, and parents are going to like gawk and be like, no way. And like kids are going to be like, no, till 16 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the recommendation, is that you're not allowing your child on social media apps until they're 16 years old, just to kind of give their, talk about development, like giving them enough time cognitively to develop so that they can make good choices on those platforms compared to earlier stages. Because like the bullying is rampant on it, and the inappropriate, images and things. And I've seen horror, like literally have listened to horror stories about the impact that social media has, where it's like one of my clients was sent, or this tween was sent an image. Someone at like a school basketball game saw it. She didn't even, she just opened it because she was like, oh, here's this thing. And then it was an inappropriate picture. Someone behind her saw it, went and reported it to the principal. And then she got put essentially like in the juvenile detention system.
Wow.
And and so she was just like, and then all of the stuff that she had to then do to try to get herself out of this, just because she opened an image that was sent to her by someone that wasn't, it was, So I have horror stories.
What do you recommend for those conversations for parents, right? Like I've already been talking to my kids about it and sharing some of the stats and some of the research. And again, in an appropriate way and at an appropriate level, but they kind of balk, right? Like you said, and they hear me, but they kind of get it, right? Like I've been spoon feeding this a bit as to how they're not getting a phone right away, and how they're certainly not getting social media, even if we get them, right, like a smartwatch or something to get a hold of them. I mean, I was talking with a parent the other day that they said, I think it was an 8th grade parent orientation, and the messages were going to go out on the kid's phone. And like, she's raising her hand being like, hey, my kid doesn't have a phone. And like, she was literally the only one in the room. But it's interesting because a lot of kids do have phones, but I'm sitting here like, okay, yes, we need to be able to contact them, but at what level? And, how's the social media thing going to work?
Right. Like the other day, it was funny because we have twin 7-year-olds, and they were like, hey, when are we going to get a phone? And we're like, not for a really long time. Like, it's not happening. Like everywhere where you guys go, an adult that is already there.
Yeah.
And so like until they start doing like practices where we're like leaving them and those kind of things, and if the practice ends early, then they need to get a hold of us. That's when I got a phone, was like when I started doing practices, and like the practice could end earlier, it was going to run late and stuff like that, and I needed to call for a ride. Other than that,
So I know there's a best practice with a campaign out there called Wait Till 8th until you get a phone. And then now you're sounding the alarm on the research really suggests that if you're going to introduce social media, that it really needs to be until your child is 16. Okay. 16. I noticed too that with a lot of the high school kids as well, that, they're kind of turning into these, right? Like I was not a pleasant teenager. And, I think just a reminder to parents as well that just stick with your kid, right? Yeah. And I think so many people with their own trauma, it's very easy to be to just let go. Like you just get tired and let go. And I think whether, I've learned this through working at Cherry Street Mission and through addiction and poverty, poverty oftentimes isn't lack of money, it's lack of relationship. And so it makes me think a lot of people who can be difficult. And I think at times that can be teenagers, is, learning again how to regulate yourself, but to be around individuals that can be hard to be around. And I don't know what advice you have there, but I think it merits a conversation for just a minute around if you have those teenagers that are just difficult to be around, like, what are you suggesting? I mean, I'm suggesting, right, having been through it, like, just stick with them, right? Like, love them, love them through it. But like, what do you think?
I think a big thing is like, I think it goes back to that ratio piece that I was talking about earlier. And like, if you can interact, so like, those are the kids I love. And it's how I have worked with them over the years is that I figured out what their, like, I find out what their story is. What are they about? What do they love doing? And like, a lot of the time, like, if you can, you know, give them some basic self-regulation grounding techniques, and then you can really tap into what are their interests and what are, like, not just yours, but like, what are theirs, and like, lean into that. It might make the teenage years better than if you kind of just go the other way. Like, I was working with this family and they were, you know, they were stressed. They were like, he's spending too much time on, you know, technology. And I'm like, well, what does he want to do? And they're like, oh, he wants to be a YouTuber. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, so then can we give purpose to the amount of time that he's spending on his screen? Can you have him take like Udemy classes for free on how to build how to be a YouTuber? And can he take like personal branding, like classes and those kind of things? And they're like, we never thought of that. And I'm like, he has like an entrepreneurial spirit, lean into that. And then his behavior was better because he was able to channel kind of his more like oppositional nature in a socially appropriate way that was going to work for him and help him, you know, kind of have a purpose in life.
Yeah. Don't you think that's really what all of this just boils down to, is every human being seen and heard? And I think that we forget because they're kids, right? Like, they just, you know, it's interesting even hearing you say that. Like, I think about growing up and I think a lot of kids, this was the way. And when it started, right? Dual parents working. I mean, it's everything we talked about from the beginning of the call, right?
Yeah.
You're busy and, you know, we're really trying with like Liv, like, she's into horse, and like, can we go take her to a horse show once in a while? Or like, how can we, like, she wants me to play horse Roblox with her. And it's like, fine, right? Like, you know, and, you know, it's like with Jack, he's into soccer and we're going to take him to, I don't even know the name of it yet because he's just into it. But we've looked, like, I know we're going to Cincinnati and we're going to Columbus this summer to like take him to some games. And it's like, yeah, just different stuff like that. That, I mean, I don't remember that growing up. Like, I don't think a lot of us did that. And again, I think it just boils down to a lot of this wasn't done for us. So it's just the power of like, hey man, it's cool to read, you know, Dr. Dre's book over here and learn some parenting tips, or hey, go get some therapy, or hey, get with a coach and figure out a plan. It's going to work for you as well to like figure out how to realign your life to be a better parent. But I mean, we're really highly educated, smart people out here. And I think what feels so difficult and wrong and real that nobody's really being vulnerable about right now is that, like, dude, I have no idea what I'm doing here. And like, I really need some help in this parenting department.
Right. And the thing is, it's like, you hear so many people say like, oh, kids aren't born with a manual. And it's like, guess what? I've been with families in the trenches for 20 years. Let me help you. Yes. There's a better way to do it. All you need to say is like, raise your hand and be like, hey, me over here. Something's not working. And I'm like, all right, let's go.
But like you said, like, if you're... No, it doesn't mean you're broken. But isn't it wild the money people will spend to like go get a class, like you said, from branding or marketing, or like what you'll pay somebody to rewrite your resume, or like all these things like that companies will invest in. Like, I wish companies would invest in parenting classes or invest in this type of healthcare that I'm talking about for people's kids, because if things aren't good at home, y'all, things are going to be good at work. And like, parents need help with parenting. So it's like, we got to invest in parenting in the way that we invest in everything else out here.
Well, that's the thing. It was like, I have a friend and I love her. She's my speech coach, but like, she's charging people like 30, like somewhere between like $25 and $3,500 a month to become better speakers. But like, I feel like gross when I say like, oh yeah, my group parenting coaching program is going to be like $497 a month.
Yeah.
I'm like, but like, people are so willing to invest in their career, but they're not willing to invest in their marriage or their parenting or themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Well, I hope that through the podcast today, right? Like if we're going to change the world, we change our communities. If we're going to change our communities, we're going to change our families. And if we're going to change our families, it starts with us. And so that's my mission moving forward, is if we're going to land the mothership, then we have to find these pieces within us that we need to put them on the raft, send them off, heal, and figure out a better way forward. Because again, this is not working. But I'm so grateful that you had a banner year, that you got to do this TEDx talk, that you wrote this ridiculously amazing book, again, called the #2 parenting book, Practical Tips for the Pooped Out Parent. And that's available on Amazon. I highly recommend everybody go read it. As you said, if people cannot afford it, they can email you. But any last thoughts before we wrap up here, sis?
I don't think so. I'm excited. Connect with me. I am here for you.
Yep. And again, you do such great work for families. And I know it was something that we were looking for on the front end that I just kept, right? Like calling office to office and like trying to work with these therapists on like, no, you don't understand. Like what I'm looking for, right, is like a systems changed based on what the dynamics are currently with the health of my child and what we're dealing with. And so I wish I would have found you earlier, but you really do get all of this. And like you said, you have 20 years of experience now really working through what are the practical tips and applications that really are going to help families. So thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited again for all that you've done and that I know that you're going to continue to do. So let's keep doing it out here and let's keep helping families. Friends, listen, you're going to want to tune in with me for next week's podcast because I'm launching my new company, The Just District. It's a family wellness clinic that's freaking revolutionizing health and wellness. You'll want to join me and my guest and friend, Christy Lorite, a certified nurse practitioner, and my medical lead as we talk about better testing, better treatment, better care, and better support. Thank you, Precision Chiropractic, Jennifer Pancyzyszyn with Edward Jones, Dutch Maids, the Avalon Foundation, and CHIKA Creative for believing in better care, better support, and better outcomes for mamas and their families in the real world. The information provided in the podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical, health, or nutritional advice.